We've discussed all the different ways that the New Orleans Saints are rebuilding and reinvigorating their offense, but one thing came to light on the second day of training camp practice that I thought was very valuable, which is how the New Orleans Saints are preparing for their opponents. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints. I am your host, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network on SI. And on today's show, we're going to be taking a look at a lot of different notes from the second day of New Orleans Saints training camp here in beautiful Irvine, California. I'm coming at you live from the campus of the Claire Trevor School of the Arts on UC Irvine. This is my old stomping ground, so pretty cool to be doing the show here. We're going to take a look at a couple of different things. We're going to go into injuries, attendance, all of those pieces, with a specific look at Kendre Miller, who was absent with his hamstring injury. What does it mean for the running back, and how did it impact the running back rotation, and in particular, Jordan Mims? We're going to break all of that down. We're also going to take a look at how the defense is setting the tone early. Does that mean that this is a typical situation in terms of what we're used to seeing in training camps, where a defense kicks off first, or are we starting to find a place to be concerned about the New Orleans Saints offense? We're going to kick everything off with a look at how the New Orleans Saints are preparing themselves to be better prepared for their opposition, thanks to a great conversation that I had with New Orleans Saints offensive lineman Landon Young. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us your first listen of the day every day, and for being here as a part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and for being an everydayer here on the show. Today's episode brought to you by friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. All right, so New Orleans Saints had a little bit of a big kickoff yesterday on Wednesday, week one or day one of training camp, but then, it was a little bit of a ramp-up period, a little bit of an acclimation period, things like that. They continued a bit of that acclimation period, a little bit more run today on the offensive side than, passing on the offensive side, although there was a big completion from Nathan Peterman to Mason Tipton on a blown coverage downfield. But for me, I think the thing that was kind of the biggest takeaway was actually a conversation that I had with a player after practice. Spoke with Landon Young, who is always phenomenal. This is a guy that is a brilliant player to talk to, very, very smart. I think he's got a career in media after this if he wants it, just incredibly smart. Or maybe coaching, right? Maybe coaching might be the way that he would rather go. But I wanted to get an idea of how things are different for the New Orleans Saints on offense, not just the motion and the play action and, the wide zone runs, getting to the outside, attacking the edges, things like that. I wanted to get a little bit more of a practical look at, hey, how are things mechanically different for how the offense operates? And Landon Young gave me a great piece of insight. Now, of course, didn't go too in-depth on everything because you can't give away the trade secrets. But one of the things that he talked about was the New Orleans Saints have rules now in terms of how they respond to anything that a defense can do across from them. Now, there's always going to be something that a defense does that maybe potentially throws a wrinkle into what it is that they want to do that maybe they're not prepared for and things like that. And look, that's the roll of the dice. That's the chess game of the NFL. You kind of sit back on that and you go, you know what, great job defense. And then you pat them on the helmet. Then you go back to the sideline and you get ready for your next play. But as a part of what it is that the Saints are kind of doing with this Klint Kubiak offense, they want to be prepared for what NFL defenses typically do around the league. So one of the ways that they do that is that they've set themselves up with sets of rules that allow them to be able to react to what an opposing defense might do, even if it's all the way down to the last second, kind of last second, last moment shifts, last moment changes, and what the defensive alignment might look like, things like that. So let me give you a little bit of an example here. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. The first thing that you would think about is, okay, so how does a defense do something before the snap that affects what an offense might do? So a couple of things to think of would be like safeties rolling or rotating, right? You start off with two safeties deep, then right before the ball is snapped, one safety rotates down to the box, the other one rotates over the top. You thought you were going to get middle of the field open coverage, which would mean literally the middle of the field is open and there's not a body there. Now the middle of the field is closed because there is a body there, and then you have to adjust. That's one example. Another example might be something like a line shift, right? The defensive line comes out in a certain alignment, certain spacing. The offensive line is looking at that, they're ready for it, but then just before the ball is snapped, or as, the Saints are doing their pre-snap kind of diagnosis of everything, the defense responds by maybe opening up a little bit, right? More space in between those pass rushers, or shifting to the left side or shifting to the right side, or maybe an end just shifts further out wide, so that instead of him being, in a 5 tech, he bounces all the way out to, a 7-eye or something like that, gets further towards the tackle as opposed to towards the guard, something like that, right? Or even on the outside shoulder of the tackle in those situations, whatever it might be. In all of those situations, you as an offense are forced to respond to whatever it is that the defense is doing. You don't get the opportunity to kind of have a plan all the time, right? You just kind of have to, in the moment, respond to what it is that they're doing. And that can sometimes create hesitation, that could sometimes create miscommunications or missed assignments and things like that. And I think that that's a really valuable thing to try to omit in your offense. So how do the New Orleans Saints do this? They have established rules for just about anything that a defense can do, at least that they can prepare for, so that everyone on the offensive side knows that if the ball is down and they're ready to get started, they're lined up, they're at the line of scrimmage, and a defense does this, we all respond by doing this. Running the same thing, but we know that because the defense just did this, we're looking to do this, right? Or another way to look at it is the Saints, when they come out on third down on their defense, they'll typically come down instead of with 4 defensive linemen, they'll have 3 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers that are kind of threatening the A gaps on either side of the nose tackle, and then they'll bring 2 safeties towards the outside. You see this on third downs for the Saints consistently. And the trick to that for opposing offenses is that you're trying to throw them off because they don't know who's coming, right? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guys on the line. Who's rushing the passer, who's dropping back in the coverage, all that kind of stuff. And so basically, when you get to a situation like that, the offensive line, if you don't have these rules established, just kind of has to wait and see who rushes the passer, and then they have to decide, okay, so who's my responsibility? I got to go get this guy, that person's got to go. And then there's so many of these adjustments that are happening after the snap that it opens up for a lot of, unfortunately, situations where you could miss an assignment or have some miscommunication, whatever it might be, or somebody adjusts the wrong way when they thought they were adjusting the right way, whatever it might be. Having these sets of rules where everyone is on the same page allows you to be able to know, okay, so this is what the offense is doing. If this guy comes screaming off the edge, it's going to be the entire offense knowing, like, okay, well, if that guy comes flying off the edge, they're just going to dump the ball off on the quick check down and then try to get 4 or 5 yards on first down or on second down or whatever. And that's fine. And you'll take that because if you get 4 yards per play, every single play, you're winning a football game because you can't be stopped at that point, right? So that's the way that the Saints are kind of bringing all this in. And I thought Landon Young did a specifically phenomenal example or phenomenal job of kind of expressing and explaining to me how it is that the Saints end up doing this, right? How they end up kind of adding all of that. Now, again, no trade secrets, nothing there for you to be able to take away from and say, oh, let's go look at it on film. But it's just something that all of these offensive players need to be on the same page of. I'll give you one more example that's kind of a really small example of where you've seen something like this before. Think about the option route, which the New Orleans Saints ran a lot of today during individual drills for both the running backs and for Taysom Hill. You have a a running back starting out, running a route from the backfield. That that running back runs the route, wraps around to the side of the offensive line, and then gets outside up to the second level. When they get to the second level, if a linebacker is covering them and leverages towards the outside, then the running back will break towards the inside and run the angle. If they do that and the linebacker covers the inside, they'll break towards the outside and run to the flats. That is one specific example of how that works for one specific player. Think about that over the course of all 11 players being willing to adjust to whatever it is that a defense is doing. That's the preparedness that the New Orleans Saints are looking for over on the offensive side of the football. So I wanted to bring that to you because I thought that was one of my biggest takeaways of the day. And I thought it was brilliant because that's one of the things that you're looking for from this New Orleans Saints offense. How are they changing? What are they doing differently? How are they approaching the game differently? There's a good example for you. All right, coming up next, the New Orleans Saints might be getting ready to be prepared for opposition and opposing defenses, but it's been the defense establishing early dominance here in training camp. Is that typical, or do we need to be concerned about the direction that the offense is going? We're going to break that down as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app and it is going to be the spot for you to go and check out to get all of your last-minute tickets. In fact, typically, prices get even cheaper over on Game Time the closer it gets to the time of the event. Definitely something you want to check out if you're like me and you like to prepare moments in advance instead of months in advance for football, basketball, baseball. If you're out of town and you got a favorite baseball team, you can grab tickets to that on Game Time. There's also theater, music, concerts, comedy, a whole bunch of other stuff for you to go and check out. So basically, any event that's going on in your city, you're going to be able to find something over at Game Time. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use that promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Yes, it is true that the New Orleans Saints offense is looking at being more prepared here in 2024 for what opposing defenses are doing, but it is the defense right now that's establishing the early dominance in practice. So is that something that we should be concerned about when looking at the New Orleans Saints offense, or is this just kind of the typical rhythm of training camp? I think this is just the typical rhythm of training camp. Let me explain to you why. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. Every day we're out here live at UC Irvine as the New Orleans Saints are covering training camp. But if you're looking, or as we're covering New Orleans Saints training camp, but if you're looking for more coverage of NFL training camps, make sure you check out Locked On Sports Today. The 24/7 stream is programmed to bring you all the biggest stories from around the world of sports, including, of course, all the big things going on around NFL training camps. Go and check it out on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 feed, which you can find on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app as well. So, listen, I think that there is a logical understanding of why the New Orleans Saints defense has been just so ridiculously good to start off training camp here in Irvine. We saw yesterday, or on the first day of practice, Wednesday, the team come out there and get a pick six with Demario Davis over the middle of the field by Derek Carr, trying to get to Rashid Shaheed, picks it off, gets around the right side, and ends up getting what would have been a pick six or a touchdown. Today, on Wednesday, or it's Thursday rather, the second day of training camp, we saw Paulson Adebo with an interception on Derek Carr off of great coverage. And then we also saw a Roderick Teamer interception off of Jake Haener as well. So we've seen 3 interceptions thrown so far, but we've also seen a pair of touchdowns, right? Completion from Derek Carr to Taysom Hill for a touchdown at one point off of what was either a blown coverage or a missed tackle. And then you have a blown coverage that led to a huge completion from Nathan Peterman, who's got both of the best plays of this of the offense so far. He connected to A.T. Perry on a nice one, day one, connected to Mason Tipton for about a 40-yard bomb in what would have been a big play there as well. So good stuff there from the New Orleans Saints offense, but it's been the defense more consistently that's been giving the team some trouble. So not only has it been the interceptions and sort of the takeaways, but it's also been other things like blowing up screens and things like that. There was a great play by Pete Werner who ended up sniffing out a screen, blowing it up. We saw Willie Gay do the same thing in day one of practice. We saw Willie Gay also have another very strong day the second day. I think it's going to be very, very tough to keep this guy off the field. First of all, I love the question from my colleague Doug Mouton, who's literally sitting to my right on the other side of the glass. That's to my right. He asked Dennis Allen, with the athleticism of a Willie Gay, does it allow you to be able to utilize 3 linebackers in situations where you might instead have typically before used 5 DBs? And certainly that is a big part of what the New Orleans Saints could now do, because you can have that linebacker match up with a tight end. And in some cases, you might be able to have that linebacker with Willie Gay's speed, his coverage ability, all these other things, match up with, a big slot guy or something like that as well at wide receiver. So there's lots of good things that the Saints might be able to get done there thanks to a Willie Gay. But it also gives you the opportunity to be able to be better prepared for 2 running back sets, 2 tight end sets, things like that. So is the sort of first or fast start for the New Orleans Saints defense a bigger part of training camp in a typical rhythm of training camp, or is it that we should be concerned about the New Orleans Saints offense? And I think with just 2 practices down, I feel pretty safe to say that this is the typical training camp defense starts faster than the offense rhythm. We've seen this year in and year out, not just in New Orleans, but across the entire league when it comes to training camps, that is typically the case. Why is that? Well, a lot of times you see more turnover on offense than you see on defense, especially here recently across what the landscape of the NFL has been. Not only have you seen more turnover on the offensive roster, but you're seeing more and more turnover of offensive coordinators year in and year out and year in and year out. And offenses are always trying to do something new and advance their system and change their scheme and make adjustments and all these other things. So there's always a lot more newness on offense than there typically is on defense. So when the defense just kind of gets back to doing the thing well that they've always done well, that kind of puts them at a little bit of an advantage as compared to what they would typically have on the offensive side, where there's a lot of adjustment, change, new things to learn, new systems, things like that. And especially here in New Orleans, you have a new offensive coordinator, which also means a new play caller, which also means a new offensive play designer, which also means a new offensive system for everybody and a new language for everybody. So it makes sense that the offense is kind of getting off to a slow start here 2 days in. Honestly, if you ask me, if they come out here in 4 days and they have a fantastic season but have a fantastic session, that's a fast start to me. It's a pretty fast start, especially right now where they're focusing a lot more on the run. Then it feels like they're focusing in the passing game, because once the passing game kind of gets rolling, that's when you're going to see a lot more of the big plays, the highlight plays, the sexy plays, all that kind of stuff. That's just stuff that we're not seeing right now, although the Saints have found those moments. I mentioned the Mason Tipton catch, I mentioned the Taysom Hill catch, those things. They have found those moments here and there. So I wouldn't start signaling the alarm bells on the New Orleans Saints offense just yet. I think it's a little bit too early for that. I think if we get into week 2, week 3, or week 2, like the end of week 2, beginning of week 2, however it is that you want to look at it, and this offense is operating like it has over the course of the first 2 days, to where it's a little timid, to where it's not super high energy, to where it's not attacking as much down the field, then I think it's okay to start to say ding ding ding, sound the alarm a little bit on that. But I wouldn't be worried about it just yet, especially with the things that I'm hearing from players. Not only am I hearing from the players that this offense is player friendly, but I'm hearing from a lot of the players that this offense is fun for them. It allows them to be able to go out there, and one player told me, simply play football. And that's the idea here. That's what you would want to see from an offense that is built to be player friendly. It allows them to just come out and play their game, do what it is that they do, and ideally do it well. So I think that we'll start to see some of those advancements for this offense coming along and things like that. So I wouldn't be super concerned about things just yet. I think we can pump the brakes on the concern a little bit. Not that I've seen it, but I just want to let you know you're right not to panic right now. And I think that that's absolutely the way to look at it. All right, I want to here, before we transition over to attendance and stuff like that, the thing that I want to look at real quick as we button up this topic is why I still think that even though the New Orleans Saints offense not getting off to a fast start doesn't necessarily mean we have to sound the alarm bells about the offense, it is still okay to give the defense credit. Because here's the thing, right? How many times in the past, I'm not talking about anything recent, but how many times in the past have you seen, and you don't even think New Orleans Saints in this situation, but how many times in the past have you seen a quarterback throw a football directly to a defender and that defender not be able to come up with that catch? How many times have you seen in the past a running back one-on-one with a defensive back, and a defensive back or a defensive player not being able to get in position to make a stop, right? Sometimes, even when an offense is struggling, a defense doesn't necessarily get the opportunity or have the skill to capitalize on that. We see that across the NFL all the time. What I love seeing here is that while the New Orleans Saints offense may be still kind of like getting their sea legs, if you will, the Saints defense is doing a really good job taking advantage of the opportunities that's in front of them. They're not missing on opportunities. They're being an opportunistic defense. And I think that that goes a long way in terms of what it is that you want to see from this New Orleans Saints defense, even though the offense is still kind of getting its legs under them. So I just wanted to point that out too. It's okay to look at the New Orleans Saints offense and go, you know what? It's taking time. They're kind of on a slow acclimation period, ramp up and all of this stuff. But it's still okay to be excited about the fact that the defense is able to take advantage of that with their own skill set. All right, coming up next, what I want to do next is take a look at attendance, news, notes. I'll tell you about some of the other plays that happened today, some of the other things that I observed. But I want to start off with Kendre Miller. He was not present at day 2 of training camp after leaving with a hamstring injury day 1. What could that mean? And of course, how did that impact the New Orleans Saints running back rotation? We got all that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. eBay Motors is the best place to go for whatever it is that you're looking for when it comes to your... Why can't I get my thing up? There we go. Whenever it comes to your car, right? Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has everything that you're looking for. And when it comes down to passion, drive, patience, it's the whole formula that goes together for winning championships. It also helps you keep your ride or die alive. So whether you're looking for things like superchargers, LED headlights, roof racks, exhaust kits, whatever you're into, you're going to be able to find it over at ebaymotors.com because they have over 122 parts and accessories for your number one ride or die. So you'll be able to find exactly what it is that you're looking for every time over at ebaymotors.com. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back, because with eBay Guaranteed Fit, you're burning rubber, not cash. So with all the parts that you need at the prices that you want, you're going to be able to head over to eBay Motors today to make your car an MVP and start bringing home some huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive today at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply, and eBay Guaranteed Fit available only to U.S. customers. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. We are wrapping up this episode of Locked On Saints, and Kendre Miller was not present for the second day of New Orleans Saints training camp. What does that mean for Kendre Miller? What does that mean for the running backs around him, and how did that impact the running back rotation? Let's break it all down. So remember, in case you missed it, yesterday on Wednesday, when the Saints kicked off training camp, Kendre Miller, New Orleans Saints running back who was drafted in the 2023 NFL draft in the third round, suffered an injury. It was a hamstring injury. He ended up having to leave practice, and it happened during individual drills before team drills began. The reason why this is important is because as a part of the sort of aftermath of that, New Orleans Saints head coach Dennis Allen effectively kind of issued a little bit of a challenge to Kendre Miller, right? He said something to the effect of, this is a guy that's got to find a way to stay healthy, stay out on the field. He's not going to be able to it's hard to fight for a roster spot when you're in the training room. It was another thing that he said, as I paraphrase. So these are things that I look at and I go, wow, okay, so those are pretty big statements by your head coach, right? Especially a guy like DA who doesn't typically call players out or have those shots across the bow when it comes to players and things like that. I want to be careful about, say, calling him out because I actually think it's warranted. Like, it's okay. I think that's good coaching. I think it's okay to say, hey, this is what we need from you, and say it publicly. I think that that's fine. I don't have any issues with that, but I want to be careful of the phrase call him out or call anybody out because it does come off as particularly negative. So I just want to be careful of that. But after suffering the hamstring injury and then that particular phrasing of it's hard to earn a spot on the roster, not you get more snaps, earn a better place in the rotation, build trust, whatever, it started a lot of questions about how the New Orleans Saints would respond if Kendre Miller was not able to get back out on the field. Well, Kendre Miller was not able to get back out on the field. Both players who exited practice early on the first day of camp were not present for the second day of camp. That's Kendre Miller, the New Orleans Saints running back, as well as offensive tackle who they acquired this offseason via free agency, Justin Herron. Now, with Kendre Miller being out, the way that impacted the New Orleans Saints running backs is that it moved Jordan Mims, who is added. So Jordan Mims came to the New Orleans Saints as a free agent as an undrafted rookie, but the Saints didn't bring him in as an undrafted free agent. He ended up being signed by the Buffalo Bills, waived by the Buffalo Bills, and then the Saints went out and grabbed him in the open market. But he came in, he's got time with, Jake Haener from Fresno State. They're both Fresno State Bulldogs, all that other stuff. But he came and he joined the New Orleans Saints, and then he stuck around all season on the practice squad, all that kind of stuff, got a little bit of limited action, all that. He is a guy that then ended up moving up in the rotation. So it went Alvin Kamara, Jamal Williams, and then Jordan Mims. Then you had James Robertson, and then you also had Jacob Kibodi as well. And so with Jordan Mims moving up in that rotation, he got a lot of looks, and he looked pretty good. I posted a video on X, Twitter, formerly known as Twitter, however it is that you want to look at it, of him running a drill. Remember, I mentioned one of the new drills in yesterday's show, so they had 3 of those kind of gates, and then they would have the running back start with the ball. 2 coaches would run up and fill those gaps, and the running back had to quickly choose the third gap, right? It's just about reading and reacting and all these other things. Today, they did a similar drill, but they had 2 gates, and then there was a handoff, and then one gap got filled, and then the running back had to quickly set or move to the other gate. You have to do this stuff pretty quickly, so you don't run into the gates and all these other things. So there was that, and then there was also a couple of bag drills and stuff like that. And Jordan Mims his footwork has always been the thing that has stood out to me anytime that he is out there on the field and that we've gotten to see him in practice, and he looked really, really good in that respect today. Didn't have any real big standout moments in team drills, but that's okay. I don't think that has to be the big thing, especially day 2 and whatever, with all the run work going on and all those kinds of things. Look, I'm not saying that Kendre Miller's not going to make the roster. I think it's still very likely that he makes the roster, and I think you got to respond when you kind of get challenged in that way by your head coach. And I'm looking forward to seeing Kendre Miller respond. He's a very talented player. He's a smart guy. I think he's going to have the opportunity to do that, but then he's going to have to do it once he comes back healthy. And that's going to be the challenging thing with the hamstring injury, because you just never know. Like, hamstring injuries are typically an if not when kind of thing in terms of reoccurrence. So you want to be very careful about that. So for a guy like Kendre, for a guy like Jordan Mims, the door is open, right? He has the opportunity now to kind of walk through and then try to take advantage of this opportunity that's there for him. If he can do that, it could be very interesting. I think Jordan Mims is a guy to watch. The door is open. He's talented. He loves this system. He has a lot of fun in this system, and he's kind of built for this system. Like, he's the kind of running back, good vision, good reactionary quickness, good footwork. Like, those are all things you need to be able to run the outside zone and wide zone scheme. And he's a good receiver out of the backfield as well, and a solid route runner out of the backfield as well. I think he can probably continue to take steps forward in a lot of different places and stuff like that, but this is his opportunity to do that. If he can show that he's taking those steps forward, it's going to be really hard. It's going to make things really, really tough for Kendre Miller if he's struggling to get back out on the field or stay out on the field, which has kind of unfortunately been the story of his very, very young career so far. And when I say young, I mean he came into the NFL young. So it's not time to rule Kendre Miller out, but it's definitely time to pay attention to Jordan Mims. All right, let me give you some other attendance notes and some other injury things. We had a concerning injury for the New Orleans Saints today. It was undrafted free agent defensive end Trajan Jeffcoat had an elbow injury. Was on the field for a while, about 5 minutes or so, before he was eventually carted off. And that was really tough to see. I don't know what's going to happen there. It did not seem good. Anytime that you have to get carted off with a non-back or lower leg injury, that's typically pretty telling. So we'll see how things go, but definitely one to pay attention to. And it's unfortunate because he's a talented young player. He wasn't a guy that I looked at and went like, okay, he's for sure going to make the roster, but he was definitely a practice squad. Let him continue to develop and then see if he can turn into a Carl Granderson-like presence for you in a few years, right? They were so patient with Carl Granderson as an undrafted free agent through the practice squad and everything. And you saw the development role and line that he took. It felt like Trajan Jeffcoat had something kind of lined up in front of him that he was setting up to take advantage of. So hopefully this doesn't end up throwing a wrench in that opportunity for him, right? Hopefully it ends up kind of working out so that he'll be able to get back as a part of this team sooner rather than later. But yeah, getting carted off with an elbow injury, typically not a great sign. We also had another injury take place as well with Shane Lemieux, who had an ankle injury. He ended up leaving practice as well. We'll see how things go with him as he continues to move forward, but it does feel like, 2 injuries each of the first 2 days. You definitely like to see a little bit more of these guys, not having to deal with this. So what is it? Is it conditioning? Is it hydration? Is it all these other things? Is they're kind of feeling out their new environment? Anything is possible in terms of what it is, but ideally, like, these guys are going to be able to kind of move past some of these are going to be able to move past like some of these injury issues and things like that. So we'll see. Hopefully we see some of those guys back out on the field sooner rather than later, and certainly hope for the best when it comes to Trajan Jeffcoat. Couple of notes for you that I thought were interesting. Let me grab my notebook. For the Saints, yesterday, the first day of practice, we saw Taysom Hill kind of take snaps everywhere. During individual drills, he worked almost exclusively with the tight ends. So it's going to be pretty... I'm looking forward to seeing like all the different ways that Taysom Hill ends up getting used, because we know he's going to get quarterback snaps. He might get fewer of them, but we know he's still going to get snaps at quarterback, but he continued to work a lot with the tight ends. The Saints wide receivers and cornerbacks did some one-on-one reps without any passes being thrown, so expect one-on-one notes here to come in the next few days. Wide receivers Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave worked with new wide receiver coach Keith Williams for a long time after practice. And also Paulson Adebo and another defensive back. He was wearing a shirt over his jersey, so I couldn't tell who it was. I think it was Jonathan Abram. We're both working on the jugs machine for a long time after practice as well, so working on their catching and all those other things. So great to kind of see like all of the work that's going into these practices, the focus, the intensity, all this other stuff, but then also see these guys stick around and push more and more. I think that's a really, really good sign for the buy-in, the dedication, all those other question marks that you might have in terms of culture for any football team. So I think that's all that I've got for today in terms of our big notes and stuff like that. We did see Nephi Sewell out on the practice field, or out around the practice field. He was in street clothes walking around, so it was our first time during training camp seeing him. We didn't see him the first day of camp, so it was good to see him out there. All smiles and everything like that. No boot, visible or anything, so that was good to see as well. Juwan Johnson and Tano Passanio we saw yesterday. Juwan Johnson also no boot, so his boot's off too. So good news when it comes to all of that. All right, y'all. If you have questions, make sure you drop your questions because we'll have another show tomorrow morning where we're going to answer those questions. So go ahead and drop those in, and we'll hit some of the kind of other pieces. But we wanted to go a little bit more in-depth today, especially with all the big things that were going on. So we appreciate you very much, as always. Make it Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out for your second listen today, Locked On Pelicans with Jake Madison, Locked On LSU with Matt Moscona. And we appreciate you, as always, for making us your part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. And as always, please, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how your mom and them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.